We got some breaking news here. Myles Garrett has officially requested a trade.
Get me the hell out of here!
Any team would want Garrett on their roster, but who realistically can make it happen in your mind?
Are the Eagles really going to get Myles Garrett? Like, this is stupid. We can't let them do this.
That Howie's willing to move on from some of these guys because he's looking to make a big swing. And that big swing would be for Myles Garrett. Some of these guys that...
But if anybody can pull it off, you know who can do it. Definitely. Howie Roseman. He'll pull it off.
I just want to be able to compete in those big games and contend for a championship.
Year after year, Eagles fans and fans of teams around the NFL think their team is going to trade for the best players on bad teams. We saw it a couple years ago with Patrick Surtain. More recently, Max Crosby has been a regular in Twitter trade discussions, and now Myles Garrett is the talk of the town. But are the Eagles really going to trade for Myles Garrett? And a better question is, should the Eagles give up the contract and assets needed to acquire a player like Myles Garrett? I was skeptical at first, but after thinking about it, there's several reasons why Howie Roseman should make a move for him. Today, we'll look at various contracts and implications for Garrett, including why trading and extending makes a lot more sense than giving him the exact same contract if he was a free agent. This episode will be somewhat of a deep dive on the way Roseman structures contracts. We'll also look at some trade scenarios. But first, let's look at why the Eagles should go after Myles Garrett as opposed to other pass rushers. It's quite well known that Garrett is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. The 2023 NFL Defensive Player of the Year has led the NFL in sacks and pass rush win rate over the past 3 seasons and is third in total pressures. But the thing with elite pass rushers is that they are exponentially better than good pass rushers. Nothing exemplifies that better than this chart showing the pass rush win rates of all edge rushers between 2022 and 2024 that had a minimum of 300 pass rushes. The top 15 or so pass rushers are in a tier of their own, and then after that we start to see production level off. But even within those top 15 pass rushers, we see the truly elite pass rushers in a tier of their own. You want to pay up for elite pass rushers and be careful not to overpay for good production, as that's more easily replaceable. At the end of the video, we'll look at some film to touch on a hidden value Myles Garrett would have in specific to Vic Fangio's defense. But can the Eagles even afford to pay up for an elite talent like Myles Garrett? The answer is yes, and a big part of that is due to the fact that there is an inherent, yet little talked about advantage of giving a player a contract extension versus signing that same player with the same exact contract in free agency. I'll show you what I'm talking about, but we'll first need to create a few sample contracts to look at different price points. In order to come up with some sample contracts and how they would be structured, we need to look at the way Howie Roseman has designed contracts since the last collective bargaining agreement in 2020. There's 2 extensions we need to talk about: rookie extensions and second extensions. Rookie extensions are the extensions given to a player after their rookie contract expires, and second extensions are the extensions given to players after their rookie extensions. Teams will structure rookie extensions differently, but Howie Roseman prefers to offer 4-year rookie extensions outside of quarterbacks and kickers and punters. We saw that with Jordan Mailata in 2021, with Dallas Goedert also in 2021, and with Landon Dickerson in 2024. We saw that when the Eagles traded for AJ and then gave him a 4-year extension. Devontae Smith's deal is technically a 3-year extension, but really, it's a 4-year extension that's tied to his guaranteed 5th-year option the Eagles picked up the day before the contract extension was announced. We'll likely see a similar thing play out with Jalen Carter next offseason. The only players that didn't receive a 4-year rookie extension was Jalen Hurts, as quarterback contracts tend to be a little bit different, and Josh Sweat and Avonte Maddox. Sweat hadn't been a starter the year he signed his contract, so it was somewhat of a gamble on future production while giving the team an out after 2 years. Maddox was coming off the worst year of his career, playing mostly outside corner in 2020, so the Eagles gave him a shorter contract and an out after 2 years, which they took before bringing him back in 2024 on a much cheaper 1-year deal. But for non-quarterback players that the Eagles fully trust to be long-time starters, they will give 4-year rookie extensions. The second extension is often a 3-year deal. We saw that when the Eagles traded for and then signed Darius Slay in 2020, and with AJ Brown and Jordan Mailata in 2024. If the Eagles trade for Garrett, they will more than likely sign him to a 3-year extension similar to AJ Brown's 2024 deal, with around 80% of the contract guaranteed money money and a signing bonus that's around 20% of the total. But how much money are we talking about? Garrett might give the Eagles a discount considering he wants to compete for a championship, and he's talked fondly of the Eagles in the past. A discount would be for a contract around $35 million per year. Yes, that's a discount relative to what he likely could get on the open market. So how would that contract break down year to year, and how does that compare to giving him the same contract as a free agent? Let's look first at how the contract would be structured if Myles was signed as a free agent. In the NFL, the last year of contracts are going to be non-guaranteed money. There's exceptions, but this is mostly how they're structured. So on a free agent, keyword free agent, 3-year contract, all of Garrett's guaranteed money would have to be accounted for in the first 2 years of the deal. Here's how it would work with the way Howie structures contracts. The base salary of the first 2 years would be guaranteed. So would the signing bonus, prorated over 5 years. There would also be a guaranteed option bonus in the second year of the contract, prorated over 5 years. That bonus would be $60.4 million. The final year would have a non-guaranteed option bonus worth roughly $34.7 million to finish out the contract. The cap hits would work out to $5.4 million in 2025, $17.6 million in 2026, and $24.6 million in 2027 if they kept Garrett through the life of the contract. However, if they were to keep Garrett for the whole contract, they would have $72.4 million in dead money in 2028 because they wouldn't be able to do a post-June 1st release with no remaining years on the contract. Not happening. What would likely happen is the Eagles potentially extend Garrett after 2026, or more likely use a post-June 1st release in 2027 to spread out the dead cap hits. That would result in a $16.3 million dead cap hit in 2027 and $44.7 million dead cap hit in 2028. Howie wouldn't do that kind of deal on free agency, but the magic of this potential deal is the fact that Garrett would have his contract extended after a trade. Let's take a look at that. Because Myles Garrett has 2 years left on his contract deal with the Browns, if the Eagles traded for the rights to Garrett's contract, they would have the ability to add that 3-year extension to the end of his contract. They would have more years to play with the money. That would allow the Eagles to spread out the guaranteed money over more years and allow them to use the post-June 1st release. It would turn into a true 3-year deal where Myles would be with the Eagles through 2027. The guaranteed money would be the base salary for 2025, 2026, and 2027. It would also be the signing bonus prorated over 5 years. Remember that $60 million option bonus that was applied to the second year of the free agent version of the contract? That would be split between 2026 and 2027. There would also be a non-guaranteed option bonus in 2028, but the Eagles would either extend or cut Garrett at that point, so I didn't show it here. The cap hit in the first year would be the same $5.4 million. The cap hit in year 2 of the extension would be $11.5 million, as opposed to the $17 million and the free agent deal, and the cap hit in year 3 would be $17.3 million. The magic happens after the 3rd year. Because they have years left on his contract due to extending him, they can now use a post-June 1st cut on Garrett in 2028 and spread his dead cap over 2 years instead of 1. Now his 2028 dead cap would be $16 million, and the final year, 2029 dead cap would be $33.6 million. Both of those dead cap numbers are lower than what they would be for the same contract signed in free agency. Also factor in this. Despite having a contract valued at $35 million per year, there is not a year that the Eagles would have a cap hit of $35 million. The closest they would come would be the 2029 dead cap 5 years after extending Garrett. Also keep in mind, what is the NFL cap limit gonna approach in 2029? The Eagles gain value by paying the most money when the cap has significantly increased. The cap has increased 53% over the past 5 seasons, although some of that is due to COVID and inflation, plus lucrative TV contracts from streaming services. But if that growth keeps up, the cap limit in 2029 would be about $427.2 million. For a more modest projection, the 5 years prior to COVID saw a cap increase of $27.6 million, and in that scenario, the cap limit in 2029 would grow about $77 million to around $356.3 million. The downside is they have to pay Myles Garrett for 2 seasons after he's done playing, but that's exactly how the Eagles have been able to fit so many high-priced contracts onto their roster. I've put up a few different scenarios for contracts and what the implications would be, as we're just speculating on contracts right now. I'm not going to go over every detail, so you can pause the video if you want to take a longer look, but There's going to be some slight intricacies in the contracts as well. For instance, 80 of the $84 million guaranteed of A.J. Brown's 2024 contract extension is accounted for between 2024 and 2026, but $4 million is accounted for in 2027. Things like that will change the numbers slightly, but the foundation is the same. Alright, now that part of the video was very heavy on numbers, but that was just the contract extension part. The Eagles would still need to go about trading for Myles Garrett and giving up assets. So what might a trade look like? The Khalil Mack trade in 2018 is the basis of most trade discussions. That trade involved sending Khalil Mack a 2020 second-round pick and a conditional 2020 fifth-round pick that turned into a seventh-round pick to the Bears in exchange for a 2019 first-round pick, a 2020 first-round pick, a 2019 sixth-round pick, and a 2020 third-round pick. At the time, Khalil Mack had already won a Defensive Player of the Year award and was a two-time All-Pro. He was also 27, 2 years younger than Myles Garrett is right now. There's also another big difference. Myles Garrett is telling the Browns he will not sign a contract extension no matter the price. Khalil Mack was simply holding out for more money, and the Raiders decided they didn't want to pay it. Garrett is very much taking away some of Cleveland's leverage by saying he won't play there. The Browns' only way to increase leverage for a trade is to use leaks to the media to try and influence the rest of the NFL into an arms race for Garrett, or act like they're not going to trade him under any circumstance. So what might a trade for Myles Garrett look like considering all of this? Could the Eagles send a first-round pick, a young player, and let's say the 2026 third-round pick the Eagles received from the Jets in the Hassan Reddick trade? There's a good chance that ends up closer to the start of the third round than the back. What players might the Eagles include? Well, let's look at the tea leaves. The Eagles had a formal meeting at the Combine, which NFL teams are limited to just 45, with Alfred Collins, a 332-pound, run-stuffing defensive lineman out of Texas. They also had a formal meeting with Cam Jackson, another 328-pound, run-stuffing defensive lineman out of Florida. It sure seems like the Eagles are potentially preparing to move on from Jordan Davis, who is entering the last year of his contract and has played limited snaps in a deep rotation. He'll be just 25 this season, and a fifth-year option, which is projected for $12.9 million, can give a future team an extra year of cap control. He could be a player to add into the deal. Many people are throwing Bryce Huff into trade proposals, and it would make sense to a degree, as he'd probably be more fit for Jim Short's scheme that wants their defensive linemen to be aggressive, firing off the ball and penetrating. Huff isn't as great of a fit for Fangio's read and react style of defense he uses more often on early downs. He also did have elite pass rush metrics and a smaller pass rush role. The problem is, the Eagles can't trade Huff now if they wanted to. His dead cap number would be more than their cap space available. If they trade him post June 1st, there would be a $22 million dead cap in 2026. That would be roughly a $15 million increase in Huff's 2026 dead cap than if they were just to wait until 2026 to use a post-June 1st cut. Conversely, Huff would have $0 on the books in dead cap in 2027 if he was traded this year though, and that's the year Garrett's cap hit would start to significantly increase. The Eagles could also reduce some of Huff's potential $22 million in dead cap by extending Dallas Goedert, which would clear roughly $10 million in cap space in 2026, depending on the contract details. But there are some more trade obstacles. Like mentioned, if he were to be included in the trade, Huff can't be traded until after June 1st. That's not a huge issue though, as the Browns wouldn't trade Garrett until after June 1st as well, due to their own cap issues. But what if the Eagles included Jordan Davis instead of Bryce Huff in the deal? Well, the fifth-year option for Davis has to be picked up by May 1st, so the Browns would not get that extra year of cap control. The Browns have also said they will not trade Garrett. Do the Browns engage in a Wild West standoff to see who blinks first? The Browns would be on the hook for an extra $13.5 million if Garrett was on the roster August 28th. How do the Eagles prepare to build their roster if the Browns try to wait out the situation? There's only been reports of one formal meeting with an edge rusher and the Eagles at the Combine. And since Garrett wouldn't get traded until after the draft, the first rounder included in the Garrett trade would likely be a 2026 pick. In my opinion, the biggest obstacle to the Eagles acquiring Myles Garrett would be another team coming into the mix with a better trade offer. Now, before we wrap this up, there is a hidden value of having a player of Garrett's caliber and a Vic Fangio defense. This is twofold, impacting the run and pass game. We'll start with the run game and then tie in the pass game. For Fangio, his defensive line is paramount to stopping the run, especially when they want to play with two high coverages. Because they're playing with a light box, he needs strong and stout defensive linemen that can constrict gaps. They also need to be able to use a technique called primary secondary, which all of a sudden got popularized in the media world with the gap and a half technique that Brandon Staley talked about, but the concept has been around forever. Fangio needs his defensive linemen to be able to control and lock out blockers to play in their primary gap and then shed back into their secondary gap when the ball cuts back. We saw plays this year where the defensive line contained the run game pretty much single-handedly while playing with light boxes. Myles Garrett has a size, length, and strength to play this technique effectively. And it's important for certain matchups, like when the Eagles decided to play a shit ton of quarters and split field safety coverages against the Chiefs' pass-happy attack. They were still able to limit the Chiefs' running backs to 3.4 yards per carry. So Garrett would help amplify Fangio's defense, especially when playing with light boxes. But this carries over to the pass game as well. Myles Garrett requires a lot of attention from opposing offenses. He gets chipped from various different players all throughout the game. When offensive players chip and release, 99.9% of the time, they are not going to run a vertical route down the field. So let's think about how that would impact a team running a lot of quarters coverages. In quarters, the safeties are responsible for matching the number 2 and sometimes number 3 receivers on anything vertical. But if their matchup is Chip and Garrett, then they know they won't need to match a receiving threat vertical. They essentially turn into a robber technique, able to bracket someone else in coverage. Take this play from the Super Bowl, for example. The Eagles are playing quarters, so Reed Blankenship is responsible for the tight end if he runs a vertical route down the field. But the tight end chips, so Reed knows that he's free to roam and looks inside to help bracket the number 2 receiver running up the middle of the field. We have 3 deep defenders bracketing 2 deep receivers with perfect leverage. Mahomes eventually gets strip sacked, but even if he threw this ball, there was nobody open. See, Myles Garrett impact is a force multiplier. He impacts plays on his own, but the attention that he draws makes it easier for smart defensive coordinators to scheme up suffocating play designs. The Eagles' defense was the best in the league last year with their top sack leader notching 8 sacks. Do the Eagles need Myles Garrett to be a great defense or win a Super Bowl? Obviously not. But think about what Saquon Barkley did for the Eagles' offense. The Eagles were 5th in rushing yards per game in 2022 and 8th in 2023 with Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift. But dropping in an elite talent like Saquon Barkley transformed their offense. Dropping an elite talent like Myles Garrett into the Eagles' defense has the potential to take them from league best to all-time great.